Good morning, all. Today's our topic is induction of labor. So, what do you mean by induction? Definition wise, initiation of uterine contractions by any method, by medical method or surgical method or combined, medical or surgical both combined for the purpose of vaginal delivery is induction of labor. So, induction means basically the labor is induced, the uterine contraction are induced, but the after the period of viability, this is important. After the period of viability, it is important to induce the labor after the period of viability. So, period of viability is 28 weeks. So it should be induced after 28 weeks, completion of 28 weeks. So initiation of uterine contractions after the period of viability by any method, by medical, surgical or combined for the purpose of vaginal delivery. So the purpose should be vaginal delivery. So, induction of labor is initiation of uterine contractions after the period of viability by any method, by medical, surgical, or combined for the purpose of vaginal delivery is induction of labor. Augmentation of labor. This is why a question. So, what is augmentation of labor? Augmentation of labor is the process of enhancing, stimulating uterine contractions that are already started, already present. The uterine contractions are going on, but they are either inadequate, insufficient, or too much slow in quantity or in severity. So, to enhance these uterine contraction means augmentation. So, there is difference between induction and augmentation. Induction means to induce the labor, to induce the uterine contraction, and augmentation of labor is to enhance already present uterine contractions. So, what is the purpose of this induction of labor? Whenever the mother, life of the mother or the fetus is at risk, then the labor is induced generally. There are also elective induction of labor whenever for the convenience of the patient or the for the obstetrician or for the hospital, whenever a certain time is given at this date, the labor will be induced. That is called as induction, elective induction of the labor. So there is no such any acceptable medical or obstetric indication is there, but it is for the convenience either for the patient or for the doctor. Whenever the time is fixed for the induction of the labor, that is called as elective induction of labor. So basically, what are the indications of induction of labor? So indications for the induction of labor. The first and foremost, you all know hypertensive disorders. Hypertensive disorder during pregnancy, that is preeclampsia and eclampsia, is the commonest indication of for the induction after completion of 28 weeks. Medical maternal complications like diabetes, already existing hypertensive patient is there, chronic renal disease is there, or cholestasis, any gallbladder problem is there and patient is not coping up with the generally a hyperemesis, if at all patient is having it is generally if at all gallbladder problem is there, then patient will suffer from excessive vomiting. So in such condition, if at all her life and the life of the fetus is at risk, then the induction of the labor is indicated. Post maturity, whenever the 42 weeks are completed, then labor should be induced unless until oligohydramnios will develop and the life of the fetus will be at risk. Abruptio placentae, when if at all the cases of abruptio, abruptio placentae is there and the life of the mother is at risk, then induction of labor is indicated. If at all the life is saved, then it should be after 28 weeks. Induction is generally after, it has to be after 28 weeks. Intrauterine growth retardation by any means. So commonest cause is hypertensive disorder. So IUGR is present, then induction is indicated. RH isoimmunization, this is we are already seen. If at all there is RH isoimmunization, then the mother might get problem, and the neonate after birth, the neonate might get problem. So to cope up with all this, induction of labor is indicated. Again, if at all the fetus is with major congenital abnormality, then there is no use for the continuing the pregnancy, so induction should be done. Premature rupture of membrane, we had already seen this PROM, and if at all there is premature rupture of membrane and amniotic fluid has been too much has been leaked, then there are chances for fetal distress. So labor should be induced. Again, IUGR is IUD is there, intrauterine death of the fetus occurred, then induction should be there. Oligohydramnios and polyhydramnios. Oligohydramnios, you remember oligohydramnios. Any cause of oligohydramnios is present, then induction of labor should be done. And whenever the lie is unstable, and so it whenever it is corrected into longitudinal lie, then induction is indicated. So the patient might not go in complication. So in induction indications for induction, hypertensive disorder, maternal medical complications like diabetes, hypertension, chronic renal disease, post maturity abruptio placentae, IUGR, IUD, RH isoimmunization, PROM, congenital abnormality is of fetus, oligohydramnios, polyhydramnios, unstable lie, when corrected into longitudinal lie. These are the indications for induction of labor. What are the contraindications? Contraindications of induction of labor. So contracted pelvis and CPD. Whenever there is cephalopelvic disproportion, then the labor should not be induced unless otherwise the mother will end up in problem. The fetus will be in jeopardy, so of course 100%, but mother will be also at problem. So whenever there is CPD, the labor should not be induced. Malposition, malpresentation like breach, transverse, oblique lie, then labor is not induced. Vertex presentation is must for the induction of the labor. Any previous case of cesarean section or hysterotomy as done, previous history of hysterotomy is there, then labor should not be induced, and the patient has to be gone for cesarean section is important. Uteroplacental factors like unexplained vaginal bleeding is there and no cause has to be found. Vasa previa, this as we have already seen, the loss of maternal blood is much more in vasa previa. Fetal blood is there and maternal blood is also there. So life of both is at risk. And placenta previa. In abruptio placentae, it is indicated. This is important. In abruptio placentae, it is indication for induction of labor. But placenta previa, we had already seen there will be problem of PPH to the patient. So induction should not be done. So induction is contraindicated in placenta previa and indicated in abruptio placentae. So active genital herpes infection, we already seen the infection. So if at all herpes infection is present, that is contraindication for induction of labor. High risk pregnancy with fetal compromise. High risk pregnancy means fetal compromise means if at all we generally see in diabetes. In diabetes also, in hypertension also, and again the female with the age more than 35 years of age, in the cases where the os is quite rigid. In such cases, induction should not be done. Patient with heart disease, so unnecessary burden should not be there on the circulation. Any case of pelvic tumor that may hamper the progress and the descent of the head, the induction of labor is contraindicated. Elderly primary gravida, we had already seen high risk pregnancy. So elderly primary gravida with obstetric or medical complication, patients suffering from already medical complications. So in such cases, labor should not be induced. It is the contraindication for the induction of labor. Umbilical cord prolapse. Cord prolapse, we are already seen this condition, cord prolapse. If at all cord has been prolapsed, then there are chances for the fetal distress, and the life of the fetus is at risk, and there are chances of PPH, postpartum hemorrhage, because of the overstretching of the cord. The placenta will come out immediately, and there are chances for the PPH. So to avoid all this, the umbilical cord prolapses is the one of the contraindication for the induction of the labor. C cervix, as we already know, this is the life-threatening condition for the female, and it may lead to hemorrhage. It may lead to hemorrhage. I mean to say, If at all the patient is of carcinoma, then her susceptibility will be increased for any infection. So she might suffer from the she might have anemia. So many complications might be there. Excessive bleeding might be there. The condition might be worsened. So this is the contraindication for induction of labor. So next one is commonest indication. In this case, these are the common conditions we come across. So these are the conditions we come across, and labor should be induced. So commonest one is post maturity. That is, if at all 42 weeks are completed, then no need to look for. If at all the fetus is normal and no problem is there, fetal heart rate is normal, so the immediate induction of labor is indicated. Preeclampsia and eclampsia were already seen. Patient's life is at risk. Again, the life of the fetus is at risk. IUGR is common. So, preterm labor has to be done. So, after 28 weeks, labor has to be induced to save the life of the mother. IUD, the fetus is already dead inside the uterus. So the fetus is dead, so the labor can be induced. So the infection should not be there to the mother. So life of the mother has to be saved. So immediate induction is indicated. Premature rupture of membrane, again we had already seen, to reduce the fetal distress and to save the life of the fetus. It is important to induce the labor. Congenital malformation, if any case there is gross congenital malformation, then labor should be induced, and unnecessary burden should not be given to the mother and to the society. Again, antepartum hemorrhage. If at all the cases of antepartum hemorrhage, we had already seen in antepartum hemorrhage, if at all abruptio placentae is there, then it is indication. In antepartum hemorrhage, abruptio placentae is there, then it is indication for induction of labor, and placenta previa is contraindication for the induction of labor. You must remember, in antepartum hemorrhage, abruptio placentae is the indication, and placenta previa is the contraindication for induction of labor. Polyhydramnios. Polyhydramnios, already we had seen oligohydramnios and polyhydramnios. If at all it is there, then labor should be induced to prevent the complications. Dangers for the induction of labor. So dangers for the induction, maternal dangers and fetal dangers. If at all we induce the labor, what might be the dangers or the complications? Psychological upset when there is induction failure. The patient might be psychologically disturbed if at all there is failure in the induction and cesarean section has to be done. If at all operative interference is, then psychologically patient will get somewhat upset, and counseling is needed in such condition. Again, if at all the labor is prolonged, then abnormal uterine actions, abnormal uterine contractions will be there. Patient will be undue in the stress for long duration, and she will suffer mentally and physically. She will be under stress. Increased need of analgesia during labor, as it is the labor is induced, then again psychologically and physically the patient is not that much prepared, so there will be need for analgesics. Again, increased operative interference. So if at all induction failure occurs, then cesarean section has to be done to save the life of the fetus and to the mother. So increased operative interference in cesarean section, if at all proper induction is not given, and if at all any problem occurs, then cesarean is indicated, and some permanent morbidity will be there to the mother. That is increased morbidity. So it will lead to maternal morbidity. So fetal problems. So fetal means iatrogenic prematurity. That there is prematurity. But all you are inducing the labor before 37 weeks, then there will be prematurity, and this is iatrogenic means man-made, induced. That is iatrogenic. So that is iatrogenic prematurity. Hypoxia due to uterine dysfunction. So abnormal uterine contractions might be there, and that may lead to hypoxia. Hypoxia to the fetus, and it may lead to life is in danger of the life of the fetus is in danger. Again, chances of prolonged labor. and fetal distress is there, and again operative interference. So operative interference, it will be more problem to the mother also, and to the fetus in general, somewhat less problem, but operative interference will be there. So these are the dangers for the induction of labor. So what are the parameters to assess prior to the induction of labor? Maternal parameters. To confirm the indications for the induction of labor, to exclude to confirm indications, to exclude a contraindication, to assess Bishop score. We already know what is Bishop score. That is for the favorable cervix. We have to see in Bishop score, right? Perform clinical pelvimetry to assess pelvic adequacy. Means CPD. We have to rule out contracted pelvis and cephalopelvic disproportion. To perform clinical pelvimetry to be performed. And again, adequate counseling about the risk benefits. The counseling of the patient is important about the risk benefits, what are the alternatives for the induction, and with the family members and with the female, all the topics should be discussed. Either if at all the failure will be there, cesarean has to be done. This counseling is important and this has to be done. Again, fetal. What are the fetal parameters? To ensure the fetal gestational age, this is important. 28 weeks should be completed so that we can save the life of the fetus. So, for the saving of the life, gestational age is very important. Is as far as possible, it should be as late as up to the 37 weeks. To estimate the fetal weight by ultrasound, we generally estimate the fetal weight. So, ultrasound has to be done to maintain. It should be more than to save the life. It should be more than 500, but it is given in the book. But clinically, it should be more than 1 kg, 1.5 kg. Then in developing countries, we can save the life of the neonate. Again, to ensure the fetal lung maturation status. If at all lung maturation is not there, respiratory failure will be occur and the death of the neonate will occur. So to ensure the fetal lung maturity status is very important, and this is one of the assessment before induction of labor has to be done. Again, ensure fetal presentation and proper vertex presentation should be there, and occipital posterior should be there, and it is very important. If at all any abnormal presentation and lies there, then complication, the female might suffer. So to ensure the fetal normal fetal presentation is very important. Again, to confirm fetal well-being, UHG should be done, and fetal heart rate has to be proper. Fetal heart rate has to be ensured so that the fetus is normal, and these are all the assessing point before the induction of the labor. What are the predictive factors for successive induction of labor? So, predictive factors for the successive induction of labor. The first and foremost is period of gestation. So, pregnancy nearer the term or post-term, the success chances of success are much more. Simple. If at all the 37 weeks are completed or more than 40 weeks are there, then the chances of success is much more because the maturity is complete, and there will not be that much chances, and support from the females physique will be there. So the chances of success will be more. Pre-induction score, Bishop score, where already we know the dilatation of cervix should be proper, and it is very important factor in this induction of labor. So dilatation of cervix should be looked for, and Bishop score should be more than 6, and that is favorable for the induction of labor. Sensitivity of the uterus. So positive oxytocin test usually you have to do. So positive oxytocin sensitivity test, if is there, then it is favorable for the induction of labor. Next one is cervical ripening. Cervical ripening is favorable multiparous, and in cases with premature rupture of membrane, cervical ripening is generally favorable. In elderly females, generally cervix is less responsive as tight, os is tight generally in elderly females. Primary gravid are cases with prolonged retention of dead fetus. In such cases, cervical ripening generally takes time. Again, presence of fetal fibronectin. Presence of fetal fibronectin. This fetal fibronectin we had already seen in preterm labor, I think. So, fetal fibronectin, it is an protein. It is present in the cervicovaginal discharge. So, if at all it is generally present before 22 weeks, and it generally appears after 34 weeks. So, if at all it is present after the completion of 28 weeks, if at all you are inducing the labor and presence of fetal fibronectin is there in cervicovaginal discharge, it means the is favorable. The conditions are generally favorable. It starts after 34 weeks of secretion and it reaches maximum at term. So, if at all they are present in more quantity fetal fibronectin, then it is indicates that the situation, the condition is favorable for IOL. Then other positive factors are maternal height. Maternal height, if it is more than 5 feet, and then it is better to induce the labor. And if at all the height is less than 5 means 4.5 feet, then there are chances of cephalopelvic disproportion, contracted pelvis, and size of the pelvis will be short, and there might be induction failures. So, normal body mass index should be there, and estimated fetal weight should be, if at all, less than 3 kg. Means it should be more than 1.5 kg and up to the 3 kg, and it is important and favorable so that the labor can be induced. Now, cervical ripening. Cervical ripening is a series of complex biochemical changes in the cervix which is mediated by the hormones. So, what is cervical ripening? It is a series of uh, biochemical changes. Biochemical changes are taking place in the cervix, and which is mediated by hormones. So, whatever the hormones secreted during pregnancy at the term and just at the initiation of the labor, and that biochemical changes mediated by hormones is whatever the changes are there in the cervix is called as cervical ripening. There is both alteration in collagen levels in the cervix and the ground substance present in the cervix, and those so that the cervix become more stretchable. It will be soft, and it will be more stretchable, so that so it is called as cervical ripening. So all this situation occurs under the influence of so many hormones. So what are the methods of cervical ripening? The first is pharmacological methods. So pharmacological and non-pharmacological methods are there. So pharmacological methods, the first one is prostaglandins. So dinoprostone, it is generally used in gel form nowadays. So gel form suppository is available, again tablet form is available. So for vaginal, these are kept, and these are introduced, and the cervical ripening is done. Misoprostol is also tablet. These are used locally generally, and so these are kept so that the ripening of the cervix occurs. Oxytocin, as we all know, oxytocin is the injectable given so that the dilatation occurs. Again, progesterone receptors antagonists given like mifepristone is given along with misoprostol, generally given. So mifepristone is given. IU 486 is the commonest mifepristone used for the cervical ripening and dilatation. Relaxin, it is basically an hormone, and it is secreted by corpus luteum. The relaxin, this hormone, whenever it gets secreted, what it causes, it will dissolve the connective tissue. It will what it will cause dissolutes. So what it will cause softening of that area. So that tissue will be get dissolved. The area will be soft, and later on for the taking of cervix and for it makes favorable for ripening of the cervix open, and it will make the cervix favorable for the labor. The next one agent used is hyaluronic acid, and estrogens are also used for the dilatation. Non-pharmacological methods. So in non-pharmacological methods, stripping of membranes, amniotomy, that is artificial rupture of membrane, mechanical dilators, osmotic dilators, cervical, transcervical balloon catheter, extra amniotic saline infusion. All these methods are used, non-pharmacological methods. Now Bishop's score. Bishop score already you had studied. This is for the cervical scoring. In this, we see 5 points. One is dilatation of the cervix, effacement of the cervix, consistency of the cervix, position of the cervix, and cervical length. So, how you will see the score? Then, if at all dilatation is cervical os is closed, then 0. If at all 1 to 2 centimeter is there dilatation, then 1, 3 to 4. The point is 2, and the score is 2. And if at all 5 and more centimeter dilatation is there of the cervix, then the score is 3. Effacement, effacement is in percent wise. 30% effacement is 0, up to 50% 1 score, up to 70% it is score 2, and more than 80% then it is 3 score. Consistency, whenever it is firm, then the score is 0. When the consistency is medium, then score is 1, and whenever it is soft, then the score is 2. And if at all it is softer and softer, then it is more the score is 3. Position of the cervix is important. If at all the position is posterior one is as it is there in a pregnancy or non-pregnant uterus, then it is 0 scoring. If it comes midline, then it is the position of the cervix midline, then score is 1. When it is anterior part and it is anteriorly positioned, then the score is 2. And again, depending on the overall the scoring, the 3 scoring given anterior position should be there up to whenever the complete dilatation is there. Again, cervical length, as you all know, cervical length, whenever it is more than 4 centimeter, normal length it should be between it is 3 to 4. It is when it is more than 4, then the score is 0, and whenever it is less than 1, then the score is 3. So this is about the induction of labor. The methods of induction of labor we will see in the next class. I hope you have understood the topic. If at all you are having any query, then mention in the comment box. I will try to resolve it. Thank you. Thank you very much.